Okay, sir.
Shuru Madi Chandrasekhar, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. On behalf of ASI Karnataka chapter, I welcome Dr. K. Rajgopal Shenai, who is a moderator for today's Journal Club, and presenter Dr. Sarabjit Mahapatra. And I welcome our chairman, Dr. Lakshman sir, and our senior members like Dr. Godi, Dr. Shivram, and all other members. And also I invite my chairman, Dr. Patel, Arvind Patel. So, Dr. Patel, sir. Sir. Actually, he told that. Patel, sir, are you on?
He doesn't seem to be connected. Kindly continue.
Sir, please, I'll hand over mic to Dr. Lakshman sir, our chairman.
No, sorry.
Please,
yeah. Welcome, Professor Shenoy. Please carry on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Chandrasekhar. At the outset, I would like to thank Karnataka State Chapter for giving this wonderful opportunity as a part of the teaching program. And this is a journal club presentation. Our experience in this is also first. I have made him to present like how we do it in our department. Obviously, there will be some changes maybe there. He has two sections, like first half is the introduction, in which just for the sake of knowledge of Namaskara Arvind Patel. So for the purpose of the knowledge for the postgraduates, the first half is about introduction and the second half is about the journal. Sarabjit is just moved into the final year now. So he's going to present this. This is a incisional hernia is a common problem. And there are so many techniques and things have been described. So one of the topics which we have selected, Dr. Gabriel is head of the department. He has selected this topic. So Dr. Lakshman and Dr. Ramakrishna, they are all excellent for the purpose of the postgraduates who are here. If you have any doubts or something, you can always ask them. They will also definitely guide and critically appraise this journal. And Dr. Shivaram and all others who are attending this, I'll say thank you and let us start. Can we start, sir?
Please go ahead, sir.
Sarabjit, you can start.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Sarabjit Mahapatra from KMC Manipal. I'll be presenting the journal club for the month of June. My moderator is Dr. K. Rajgopal Shenoy. So my topic, the topic for my journal club presentation is prophylactic single-use negative pressure dressing in closed surgical wounds after incisional hernia repair. The author are Bruno Ledo J. et al. This article has been taken from the journal Annals of Surgery, which has an impact factor of 10.13. Published date is June 2021 in volume 273, issue 6. It is a randomized controlled trial which is carried out in a hospital of Spain by the Department of Gastrosurgery. So as sir said, my journal club presentation will be divided into two parts. First is basic introduction, like theory related to my article, and then general discussion about how this paper was made by the author. So starting with the definition of an incisional hernia, it is defined as any abdominal wall gap with or without a bulge in the area of a post-operative scar, perceptible or palpable by clinical examination or imaging. Incisional abdominal wall hernias can be classified by anatomical or clinical criteria. The European Hernia Society, they have classified the classified incisional hernia based on anatomical basis. So there are two zones, medial zone and lateral zone. So medial zone is the area of incisional hernia defect which is medial to the lateral margin of rectus sheath. And there is another lateral zone which is lateral to this lateral margin of the rectus sheath. Medial zone is further classified as M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. And we can see as we go from caudally downwards, cranially downwards, subxiphoid, epigastric, umbilical, infraumbilical, and suprapubic. Similarly, for lateral zone, it is divided into L1, L2, L3, L4. L1 is subcostal, L2 is flanks, L3 is iliac, L4 is lumbar. There is another classification which is based on the size of the defect. So if it is less than 4 centimeters, it is W1. If it is 4 to 10 centimeters, W2. If it is more than 10 centimeters, it's W3. And it is commonly known as the complex or giant ventral hernias. Now, based on the clinical criteria, incisional hernias can be classified as asymptomatic, reducible, incarcerated or irreducible, and strangulated. What is an incarcerated or irreducible hernia? It is basically a hernia which can't be reduced either due to a very small size in the defect of the abdominal facial. There is a small size of facial defect, or because of the addition in the hernial sac. Strangulated hernia is basically when the blood supply to the sac has been compromised and it has become, the blood supply has been compromised, so it can be like strangulated hernia. Then we come to the management of incisional hernia. So broadly discussing it, like management can be based on the acuity of presentation and severity of symptoms. Like if we have to explain in a layman term, it can be either conservative or we can go for surgery. There is for conservative management, if the patient is asymptomatic and this defect has been there for a long time and it doesn't cause any problem to the patient, we can manage it conservative, or if it's very small size. Surgery is indicated if patient is having a large defect or patient is having pain or any symptoms, which we'll discuss later. Then incisional hernia, if surgery is planned, it can be either open surgery or a laparoscopic surgery. And in either case, sometimes we can prefer a mesh, or sometimes primary repair is also done. Once surgery is done, what our journal also mainly focuses on is the post-operative complication. There are many complications like hemorrhage and all can happen, but we'll focus on surgical site occurrences. Which surgical site occurrences are basically the complications that develop post-repair of any hernial, after repair of the hernia. So it can be surgical site infection, or there can be seroma, there can be hematoma, or it can be wound dehiscence. So surgical site infection was defined as an infection that occurred at the site of a surgical incision or in an organ space within 30 days of the surgery. Wound dehiscence was defined as the splitting apart or rupture of the margins of a previously closed wound along some or all of its length. It may or may not be associated with any infection, superficial infection. Why surgical site occurrences or infection are significant? Because it can increase the average hospital stay. It can significantly increase the cost of the treatment. It can be associated with a higher 30 days morbidity rate, and it directly impacts on patients' quality of life. So there are few statistics regarding incisional hernia and surgical site infection. Abdominal surgeries have the highest 30 days rate of surgical site occurrences at 15%. Similar studies in India have found that we also have a higher rates of surgical site occurrences for abdominal surgery that varies from 23 to 38%. And overall incidence of surgical site occurrences after incisional hernia repair is 3.9 to 20%. Then there is incidence of surgical site occurrences in complex abdominal wall surgery represents 12 to 27%. In this journal, according to a study done in Spain, the seroma after in a surgical site occurrences, if seroma formation is seen in 12 to 20%, hematoma formation is seen in 7 to 10%, surgical site infection is seen in 5 to 10%, wound dehiscence in 5 up to 5%. I had tried to search similar stats in our Indian population, but I could not find any specific statistics. Then we will discuss about negative pressure wound therapy, which is also known as vacuum-assisted wound closure. What does it refer? It refers to wound dressing system that is continuously or intermittently apply subatmospheric pressure to the system, which provides a positive pressure to the surface of the wound. This VAC dressing or negative pressure wound therapy, it consists of few things. One is open pore polyurethane ether foam sponge. First, depending on the size of the wound, we take a sponge and we cut the sponge according to the size of the wound, and it is applied over the wound, and it is covered with a semi-occlusive adhesive cover. And then a hole is made over the occlusive cover, a small hole, and a fluid collection system is connected to it. A suction tube is connected to it. And this suction tube is then connected to a suction pump, which delivers around 75 to 175 mm of Hg mercury pressure to the VAC. Once this suction is started, the pump is connected. If the negative pressure wound therapy, the VAC is working if we find that the foam sponge has shrunk by 70 to 80% of its actual thickness. In this study, they have used a specific negative pressure wound therapy, which the company brand name of it is PICO. The PICO device is a small canister-free device that deals with exudate by absorption and evaporation. It delivers up to 80 millimeter mercury of negative pressure for 7 days. And it has a capacity to absorb approximately 200 ml of exudate before it becomes ineffective. So this is that specific VAC device which had been used in this study. As you can see, it is very simple and easy for it's easy for patients to use it. They have a simple button to start the suction pressure. There are multiple buttons to indicate if there is any vacuum leak is there, if the battery is low, or if it also indicates if the amount of suction is now more than 80 ml, so it needs to be changed. And it runs on the battery. So this is a diagram of two types of dressing. On our left side is the standard wound dressing. On the right side is the PICO device dressing. How does this negative pressure wound therapy actually works? It enhances the angiogenesis. It stimulates the cell-mediated cell mediators. So and decreases the edema. So it manages up to 30 ml of exudates. So initially we can see once the suction negative pressure is applied, it will increase the blood flow. It will promote the angiogenesis, and it will stimulate the granulation tissue formation. And it will manage up to 30 ml of exudate. It will protect from external contamination because of the occlusive dressing and the foam. Any external bacteria or contamination infection can be prevented. And because once the foam has shrunk to 70% of its actual strength, it will try to, because of the negative pressure, it will try to contract the wound. And because of the suction, it will try to suck the fluid from the interstitial space, and it will eventually help in reducing the edema. So now incisional hernia repair, the abdominal wall construction technique, there are many techniques, but in this study, they have focused on 3 types of methods: reverse stopper repair, transversus abdominis repair, and anterior component separation. All these techniques involve access through midline laparotomy. So we'll discuss all 3 techniques individually. In this reverse Stopa repair, as you can see, after the midline incision, abdomen was opened up in layers. The anterior rectus was opened and reflected. Rectus muscle was reflected, and the posterior rectus fascia was seen. Then retrorectus dissection was started, and a dissection was done to separate the rectus muscle from the posterior rectus fascia. So once adequate 10 to 15 centimeters of rectus fascia was dissected away and the flap was raised, the posterior rectus fascia was closed and the mesh was applied in this manner. There is a large pore polypropylene or a polyvinyl mesh was used, which was placed retrorectus behind the rectus muscle and over the posterior rectus sheath. So in few of the cases, the hernial sac and its associated facial defect was preserved as it provides another layer of autogenous tissue interposed between the intraperitoneal contents and the posterior surface of the prosthesis. The abdominal facial level between the rectus muscle and the posterior sheath were dissected to create a space for the mesh, usually 5 to 10 centimeters from the margin of the hernia. During the dissection, the care has to be taken to save the pedicles. The epigastric vessels and the nervous pedicles were preserved. The posterior fascia was closed with a 1-poly-4-hydroxybutyrate monomax running sutures to wound length ratio of at least 4:1. So the next was the transversus abdominis muscle repair. So in the first case, in patients where the posterior rectus were not approximating or there was more tension, so the retrorectus plane dissection was further moved laterally till the neurovascular bundle. So once the neurovascular bundle was reached, the transversus abdominis muscle and the transversalis fascia was dissected, and the dissection was carried out below the transversus abdominis muscle. And here we can see the transversus abdominis muscle fiber was divided and the flap was raised. So once the flap was raised and the posterior rectus was able to close without any tension, a sublay mesh was placed behind the rectus muscle and secured with the transfacial sutures. The dissection is commenced medial to the neurovascular bundles by first dividing the posterior lamina of the internal oblique to reveal and cut the transversus muscle fibers. For the reconstruction, a combination of meshes was used, an absorbable mesh of 20 to 30 centimeter and a large 13 to 40 centimeter large pore mesh was used. Both the mesh were trimmed to fit the dissected space. The polypropylene mesh was cranially and caudally secured with slowly absorbable sutures. In this journal, in this article which we are going to discuss, they have also used the technique of anterior component separation. In this, patients with a large defect where the posterior sheath could not be approximated, so the component dissection was done and the external oblique muscle was reflected, and the flap was raised. So first the external oblique was reflected, and then the retrorectus dissection was done. So this helped in approximating the anterior sheath with less tension, and the mesh was placed over the rectus muscle. Only mesh repair was done. The dissection began with the fasciotomy of the external oblique fascia, followed by dissection of the tissue plane between the external and internal oblique before medial advancement of the rectus muscle. Decision of the external oblique aponeurosis was performed 0.5 to 1 centimeter lateral to the lateral border of the rectus sheath, extending cranially to the costal margin and caudally up to the inguinal ligament. After the rectus muscle were approximated in the midline, a large polyvinyl mesh and PVDF mesh was placed only and anchored with non-absorbable sutures to the costal margin and the anterior iliac spine. In all these cases, midline laparotomy incision were closed in a standard manner. The rectus fascia was closed with a slowly absorbable monomax suture with a wound length ratio of at least 4:1. Subcutaneous tissue was closed with absorbable sutures, and skin were closed using clips. During the operation, 2 suction drain tubes were placed. One was placed in retromuscular or under the external oblique flaps, depending on the type of reconstruction technique used. And the other one was subcutaneous drain was placed. Both the drains were maintained for 3 to 4 days after hernia repair, and once removed, once their output was decreased to less than 20 ml per day. So these are the various types of various places of mesh placement for abdominal wall construction. If the mesh is placed between the facial defect, is an inlay. If it is placed over the facial defect, over the anterior rectus, it's the onlay. Sublay can be placed retromuscularly or preperitoneally or intraperitoneally. So after all this, what are the various techniques we have available for laparotomy wound dressing? One is the conventional method of dressing, and other is the negative pressure or subatmospheric pressure wound therapy, which we have discussed with the vacuum assisted closure device. In some areas where VAC dressing, all these equipments are not available, they have tried to do a gauze suctioning. They have created a gauze suctioning device, a wall suction applied to the sealed gauze dressing. So this is the introduction part. We have discussed the theory related to that.
Just one sec, sir. There are some questions in the chat box. If you could take it, please. Dr. Nooli asks, can you differentiate between irreducible strangulated hernia clinically?
Sarabjit, can you take that?
Yes, sir. So irreducible hernia and incarcerated hernia. In incarcerated hernia, basically there is compromise of the to the blood supply. So it might present with pain and gangrenous features. With irreducible hernia, there will no such changes in that.
So irreducibility basically refers to whatever the contents, commonly omentum or whatever, you can't reduce it. The patient need not have features of vascular compromise, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it okay, Dr. Lakshman? This is
the difference between strangulated, you're talking incarcerated and strangulated hernia.
So I just want to bring your notice when we were we were told about incarcerated means where the obstruction is due to fecal matter, which can happen in usually transverse colon, which is getting caught in the hernia. But in the modern hernia society classifications, they use the word irreducible is almost synonymous to incarcerated. That is what I understand. So, so irreducibility and incarceration, according to them, it is the same.
I would agree with that. Yes, but strangulation is where there is vascular compromise.
Correct.
Yeah. You mentioned about in your introduction about the repair of a hernia. You said it could be repaired with or without a mesh. And Dr. Ramakrishna asks, would you ever do it without a mesh?
Sir, if the defect is less than 1 centimeter, we can go for a primary repair, but it is advisable to use a mesh in all the cases.
Is it really 1 centimeter? Have you read anywhere about it? Let us look at a ventral hernia and an umbilical hernia. What is the size where you have to use a mesh? Is it 1 centimeter? Any other postgraduate? Would you like to take that? The consensus.
Usually it is 2 centimeters, sir.
Please, sir. The consensus is 3 centimeters. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it is variable. Surgeons may choose to put it in even in smaller, but it is mandatory to have a mesh if the defect is more than 3 centimeters. That is the general consensus. Okay.
But it depends on the surrounding tissues also. If it is
Absolutely.
weak,
Yeah.
so then definitely the European Hernia Society recommends mesh for all patients.
Correct. That
SAGES recommends more than 2 centimeters.
this is, as I said, not a hard and fast watertight rule, but the consensus is 3 centimeters. If the rest of the tissues are okay, and as Dr. Shivaram said quite correctly, if the tissues are weak, you can use meshes for smaller than 3 centimeters as well. And Dr. Nas specifies that for SSI, in cases of an implant like a mesh, the infection is calculated not at 30 days, but at the end of 1 year also. Okay, that is
Yes.
something that our postgraduates must keep in mind. Dr.
Yes, sir.
Nooli, complex abdominal wall repair. What do you mean by that, sir?
So,
I just want to know what is complex abdominal wall repair.
So, sir, I think, is that the one he mentioned for the giant repair? Is that the one, sir? You wanted that? Complex
He used the word, sir, complex abdominal repair. Exactly what does he mean by that?
So when the hernial sac defect is more than 10 centimeters, because of the huge size of defect, sometimes it has been called as the giant hernial defect, and it can sometimes involve both omentum and the bowel. So it can be termed as a complex hernia.
Complex also involves when there is an enterocutaneous fistula, when there is skin necrosis, and when we're not able to put the contents back, there is loss of domain, and it is causing a cardiorespiratory embarrassment. All these come under complex ventral
Correct.
hernia.
Yes.
I have
Correct.
just one
Correct,
more
sir.
to add to what Shivaram has said. It is multiple loculations in your hernial sac.
Yes,
Yes,
sir. Correct.
There are multiple loculations, that is also considered complex. And Dr. Shivaram asks, PICO system used is single use.
Yes,
one.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is single use.
Yeah. And Naz asks, how do you assess if it's fully soaked?
Sorry, sir.
You know, you mentioned that the effectivity of your suction device goes
Yes, sir.
when it is fully soaked, which is mentioned as 200 ml.
Yes, sir.
So the question is, how do you know when it is fully soaked?
It indicates there in the
There is an
Dennis
indicator there.
It's,
Yeah,
yeah, there is
Correct.
an indicator, sir. Dressing change.
it actually indicates there. And was this study funded by any company?
Uh,
As I saw, yeah, please answer.
I'm not sure, sir. I have missed this part. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's written there by the authors that no company has funded and no conflicts of interest.
And Nishant asks, what about primary repair for an incisional hernia?
So when the size of the defect is small, we go for like we reduce the sac, the hernial sac, and the anterior rectus is closed, sir.
Yeah, you see, this is a
Yeah,
slight difference. Go, please.
Yeah,
Dr.
same
Shenoy.
thing. I think we have discussed, I mean, just now, Dr. Lakshman has made clear that 3 centimeters is one arbitrary level, but as Shivaram also has put it, that if we are dealing with incisional hernia, so invariably most of these are female patients, and abdominal wall tone and so many other factors contribute to the surrounding tissue and all. So keeping that in mind, I think the decision less than 2 centimeter and all
Yeah.
just anatomical repairs. I don't know whether
the data I quoted was for umbilical hernia, and I think there is a fine differentiation in what Nishant is asking. It is about incisional hernia. All right. The story of an incisional hernia is different because there can be multiple defects, number one, and these defects can be at different times. So the standard recommendation is that even if you have one small defect in one area of an incision, you have to explore and check the whole incision, and it is probably better to cover the whole incision with a mesh. Otherwise, you will end up with a recurrence at a different point. If you had a defect at the cephalad end and then you repair only that, the two with an anatomical repair, it's not unlikely that in 6 months' time you will have a problem at the caudad end of the incision. So for an incisional hernia, it should be treated a little different from an umbilical hernia, even though both are ventral hernias.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Lakshman that this problem very often comes sometimes after whatever cesarean or hysterectomy. You get a reference from OBG. In fact, they even write as a small spigelian hernia and they refer to us. And we find, as you told, in the cranial side, one small defect, but there are one other two defects. This is not uncommon. Rightly said, it deserves it.
With suture repair, the recurrence rate is 30%.
30%.
Rather than
which can be reduced to less than 10% if you use a mesh. But suture repair has a place, as Dr. Chandrasekhar has said, in case of emergencies, if you have bowel, open the bowel and there is contaminated wound, or in an emergency situation, gangrenous bowel, all these things you do a suture repair, but in the second stage, you will have to go and do the mesh repair. That has to be explained to the patient.
Shenoy sir, can he continue? So can he continue, Shenoy sir?
Yes, definitely. Some voice disturb. Was it Shivaram's audio problem, or I was thinking myself here? Yeah. Sarabjit, please continue. So
Yes.
I was heard or not?
You were heard all right. You were heard.
Indications for suture repair. Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Okay, maybe. Yeah. Come on,
Yes.
Sarabjit.
Yes. Now we'll start the analysis of the article. So the hypothesis of the article was, with a single-use negative pressure wound therapy, it has shown as considerable cost saving for preventing and treating surgical site infection in closed surgical wound incisions. The aim of the study of this randomized controlled trial was to evaluate whether the prophylactic application of a specific single-use negative pressure wound therapy dressing on closed surgical incisions after hernia repair decreased the risk of surgical site occurrences, and if it decreased the length of the stay compared to standard non-negative, the standard conventional way of dressing. So what exactly is a randomized controlled trial? A randomized controlled trial is a trial in which the randomized controlled trial is a trial in which subjects are randomly assigned to one or two groups. One is the experimental group receiving the intervention that is being tested. So in our case, the intervention is the negative pressure wound therapy. And the other is the comparison group or the control group receiving an alternative treatment, which is the conventional method of dressing. So briefly, if we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the randomized controlled trial, it has advantages of high internal validity. It can control the exposure. The randomization is an advantage to it, as it can control the effects of both controlled and uncontrolled confounding factors, and it is a true measure of efficacy. This we can discuss later regarding the randomized controlled trial during the critical analysis of the journal. And the disadvantage is limited external validity and the difficult or complex to conduct, time-taking, and randomized controlled trials are very expensive. So what was the study outcome? The primary endpoint was once the development of surgical site occurrences was there within the first 30 days of hernial repair. And the second endpoint was the length of hospital stay. Selection criteria. So inclusion criteria were any patient who are more than 18 years of age and with an incisional hernia defect of more than 4 centimeters. which we can, depending on the classification, W2 or W3, according to European Hernia Society classification. And the exclusion criteria were patients less than 18 years of age who were unable to give written consent, patient who had an abdominal surgery intervention within 30 days before the hernial repair, patient who had undergone emergency hernia repair, pregnant patients, patients with hepatic cirrhosis, and incisional hernia not involving the midline. So the method the method which was taken up in this journal, in this study, was the randomized controlled trial was taken between May 2017 and January 2020 in La Fe University Hospital in Valencia, Spain. Patient undergoing elective midline hernia repair was done through laparotomy, were recruited pre-operatively. Those who decided to participate first signed the written informed consent. All patients who underwent hernia repair during general anesthesia with antibiotics in the form of single dose of Augmentin, 2 grams intravenously, and thromboembolic prophylaxis were also given. The abdomen was prepared using chlorhexidine. 3 abdominal wall construction techniques to repair the incisional hernia were performed during the study. As we discussed, the reverse stopa repair, transversus abdominis repair, and the anterior component separation. One of the techniques was used in each patient. At the end of the procedure, dressings were applied by the surgeon and the nursing staff under sterile condition while still in the operating room. The participating patients were randomly assigned to receive intraoperatively either the single specific use PICO dressing or the conventional dressing. The dressing was kept on the wound during the hospital stay and left in situ for 6 days. Patients were assessed again at 12 days when the wound clips were removed, and a 30-day in the outpatient clinic, and the wound was examined for the evidence of surgical site occurrences by the same study assessor, who was a member of the operating surgical team and was not blinded to the treatment group. The statistical analysis was performed on a per protocol basis. Per protocol basis means the patient who had completed followed the full protocol and had not undergone any changes or were not defaulters. Only such patients' stats were analyzed. It was a descriptive statistics, including means and standard deviation for continuous variables were used. Frequency table for the recorded variables and corresponding dispersion measures were constructed. Univariate analysis were performed using student t-test to explore quantitative variables and Fisher test if they were dichotomous, and a p-value of less than 0.5 was considered statistically significant. The calculating how the sample size was calculated, as we have seen, the percentage of patients developing surgical site infection at 30 days post-surgery following elective hernia repair was 30%. They planned to, if any treatment group any intervention was applied, and they wanted to decrease the surgical site infection to 10% with a power of 80% and an attributable risk of 5%. With an anticipated loss to follow-up of 10%. The sample size was calculated to be 150, and it was divided further into 75 patients who took the intervention and 75% who followed the conventional dressing. So this is the concert diagram. So total 150 patients were there, and they were randomized into 2 groups. The first group was allocated to the treatment, the PICO group of 75. They received the intervention, and allocated group to the control group, there were 75 who underwent the conventional dressing. Out of those 75 who got the PICO dressing, total 3 of them discontinued intervention. One was because of the emergent surgery due to the hematoma. This hematoma formation was due to intraoperatively epigastric vessel damage, and it had nothing to do with the dressing per se. That was why it was excluded. And 2 patient dressing were removed even after taking all the precautions. And in the other group, one patient discontinued intervention because of similar emergency surgery due to hematoma formation. So in both the groups, in patient who had PICO dressing, 72 patient data were analyzed, and in patient who had conventional dressing, only 74 was analyzed. So this is the per protocol analysis of the data.
Just one sec, Sir Abhijit.
Yes, sir.
Sir Rajgopal sir, can you take some of the questions that are in the chat box, please?
Yeah, I just.
Or would you like me to do that? I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dr.
please do
Naz
it, because-
asks. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Naz asks, in a subumbilical hernia, is it necessary to cover the umbilical scar also?
I think the anatomical, the principles remain the same. The size, if it is more than that, I think we should cover the defect when we are using the mesh. I think so.
Shivram?
Is it
Shivram, any comments?
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
When there is a subumbilical hernia, the umbilicus area is also a scarred tissue. It becomes weak. So it's always better to cover the umbilicus also. You can go under the umbilicus, lift it up and put the mesh also.
All right.
It is required to be covered.
Yeah. Dr. Ramakrishna makes the observation that randomization is done to avoid bias. It is not done to overcome confounding variables. And he also asks, why is cirrhosis excluded from the study?
Yeah. Sir Abhijit, can you answer that?
Sir, in cirrhotic patient, there will be accumulation of the ascitic fluid, so which can lead to infection of the mesh. So for which it was excluded from the criteria, sir.
Probably we also like to know the status of the liver cirrhosis and types of cirrhosis, and hypoproteinemia might have been one of the factors. So, and maybe development of a ascites in the post-operative period following anesthesia may be the reasons why cirrhotic patients are excluded. That's what I.
You're right, Sir Abhijit. Ascites increases intra-abdominal pressure, increases the chances of dehiscence. All right, they are hypoproteinemic, so they don't heal well. And thirdly, they are immunocompromised, so infection rates are higher. So it would be incorrect, I think, to pool cirrhotic patients with the normal liver. And I think that's a reasonable exclusion.
Yes.
Dr. Prabhakara asks, why is consent an exclusion?
So this is a randomized controlled trial. And this is a trial in which an additional type of intervention is being done, which doesn't directly or indirectly affect the patient's health. So, consent.
Let me make it simple and straightforward, Sir Abhijit, with your permission.
Yes,
any
Yes,
participation in a trial is
voluntary.
Is definitely done under an informed consent. No two ways about it. And there are two other things that the patient must be told, that he is authorized, or he has the right to come out of the trial any time of his liking, and B, that he need not even give an explanation as to why he's coming out. These are done under international conventions which apply universally for all clinical trials. So consent is an absolute must. You randomize them only after you get a consent. All right.
Yes.
And the other question asked, is it acceptable to mention the brand name like Augmentin?
No, sir. But depending.
There is no dependence. There is no dependence, Sir Abhijit.
Yes,
no
sir.
mention of trade names ever of anything. Your mesh, for example, you have to give the chemical or the generic name in your scientific communication.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Ramakrishna asks, you mentioned about the per protocol analysis.
Yes, sir.
What is the other kind of analysis that you can undertake?
So intention to treat, sir.
Yes, yes. Between the two, which do you think is better?
So per protocol analysis is better.
Really? Are you sure?
No, sir.
Yeah, actually, intention to treat is now considered the standard method. Ramakrishna, you want to comment?
I think better to tell the postgraduates difference between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sir,
Ramakrishna.
hello, sir. Yeah, I was muted. As Dr. Lakshman said, intention to treat protocol is a better form because it avoids bias of exclusions because of the various kinds like last for follow-up and all those things. If the researcher want to push one group, he tries to avoid or exclude certain patients who have got bad results, maybe death or some infection or complication. So he will try to remove all those patients, and only good results patients he will keep in the end, and only those patients' results will be analyzed. So here an element of bias will come in the per protocol analysis. In intention to treat protocol, all the patients who are originally allotted to the group must be analyzed in that group only. Even if he dies, even if he is lost for follow-up, still you have to account for the data, and he must be analyzed in the same group. So you cannot exclude any patient till the end, till the analysis. That's the intention to treat protocol. This is considered superior because it avoids bias.
Yes, sir.
Rajgopal sir, with your permission,
Please.
Sarabjit,
Yes, sir.
what is customarily done in a journal club is that at every step, there is
Yes,
a
sir.
critique. For example, at the end of your introduction and the aims of the study, for example,
Yes, sir.
then you yourself analyze, you ask the audience, for example, to say, look, is it right? Is this thought process that is mentioned in the introduction, is the design of the study, is that right? That's one critique. And then once you have the patients and the methods, all the
Yes, sir.
methods that they have used, where did they put what was their inclusion, exclusion, and the statistics.
Yes,
So
sir.
the next step is at that point in time, you again ask the audience and your group, your journal club, to give a critique, and then you give a critique yourself in the end. You would have prepared the critique, the plus points. Remember, critique means plus
Yes, sir.
and minus points, the good
Yes, sir.
and the not so good points. So have you prepared any of those critical points for this paper?
No, sir.
No. So
Like
it is
specific.
customary. It is customary
sir.
to do that. And
Yes,
so, Rajgopal sir, with your permission,
Yeah, please go ahead.
can we
Please.
put it to the audience now and say, look, what are the good points and the not so good points of this paper up to this point,
Up to now.
where you have to analyze the results? Could we know, Ravi Shankar, please?
I think the positive points for this study is it's a relevant topic. It's an extremely important part of the incisional hernia armamentarium. So it is a good relevant topic. Second one is it is published in the Annals of Surgery with a high impact factor. So it is a well respected journal with a high impact factor. So obviously the paper is good. It's a randomized control trial. So that is good. Randomization has been done properly, and informed consent has been taken. The consort diagram has been shown, and all the inclusion exclusion criteria have been shown, and I think the statistical analysis that have been applied are appropriate. So these are the things that are positive for the study. I couldn't see many negatives as far as this particular study is concerned, but maybe others have seen any.
Yeah. I specifically didn't leave it open to the postgraduates, but the postgraduates in the audience, please note that this is what you have to do. Okay. You have to read and look at it critically and then compare your criticisms with those of the seniors who come on the scene. Shivaram, you have anything to add to what, Sir Rajgopal sir, have you had such thoughts about it? Is there anything?
Yeah. No, nothing. Generally, at the end, we do it, sir. Generally, at the end of the presentation.
The whole.
At the
Okay,
end.
if you want to do it that way, you can do it. So you can do it in the end, sir. Yeah.
No. I think this way is better. This way is better because what happens is at the end, people forget also.
Forget. Sir, with your permission, sir, with your permission, Dr. Rajgopal Shanai,
please.
Thing, if and you have seen the way Dr. Lakshman and what we do it at Sagar, which is probably the standard one. I'm not saying anything different is not good, but the thing is, as you said yourself, if you break this down into different segments, at various stages, critique can be made so that the students' participation and concentration is maintained. Otherwise, it will become like a subject seminar. So that is the danger if you continuously talk and only wait for critique in the end.
Correct. Dr.
Bodhi
sir wants to tell us. Yes, sir. Sir.
Unmute, sir.
I see a serious flaw in the study because the method proposed to be used in this is to reduce the surgical site occurrences. And at the end of the study, at the bottom of the study, if you see, he's excluding the complication which has occurred in 3 cases in the control in the study group and 1 case in the control group. And if he excludes the complication which he wants to avoid by adopting a new method, there is a serious flaw in the study. How do you defend this particular flaw, Dr. Sarbjit?
So in the article, they have mentioned that this hematoma formation was due to the injury to a epigastric vessel. In the steps which they have mentioned in reverse stopa or the transverse abdominis muscle, they have specifically mentioned that the pedicle should be preserved. So in this case, it might be a error, intra-op error, which can affect the study over here. So they have, that's why excluded those 3 complications which has occurred, sir. But it and they have analyzed as per protocol statistical methods. So I think if they had approach towards the intention to treat methods, so then it could have been included and the outcome would have been different, sir.
You're right. This is
Shivaram wanted to tell something.
Just one sec, one sec, Shivaram, with your permission.
Yes.
Sarabjit, this is exactly what Dr. Ramakrishna was saying. So what happens when you do per protocol and you do not do an intention to treat is that you will find excuses for excluding the problems that you have. And that way you sort of push your view across, and that may not be correct. There is a huge bias there. And that is the point that Dr. Godey and Dr. Ramakrishna have pointed out. Shivaram, please.
Yeah. No, I want to comment. See, if you see what causes infection in these hernia cases, one is if there is an enterotomy while doing surgery, or the bowel injury, or the bowel contamination of the wound. Those things are not taken into consideration. Another thing is the duration of surgery. If it is long duration of surgery, then also wound infection rates are higher. And whether there is any blood transfusion, redosing of the antibiotics, and how long the smoking was stopped before the surgery, and what was the HbA1c level, diabetic control. And also they have compared Rivers-Stopa repair, which is a normal surgery, but you can't compare it in the group. You cannot put together everything. That is, a component separation is a massive surgery, whether it is anterior component separation or the posterior component separation. So whether any optimization was done before the surgery, I think all these things should have been included in the study.
Point well taken. Absolutely. I had down the same point, that they're really comparing apples and oranges. They should not have put everything in one basket. Dr. Naz says use of drain in this case is to tackle subcutaneous collection. What about the collection in the pre-peritoneal space? Was there another drain in this place? How is this managed? There was another drain in the submuscular layer as well, Dr. Naz. It is in the protocol. They had 2 drains there. Ramakrishna asks a very relevant question. Why dressings removed in 2 patients?
So in the article, they have mentioned that patients were instructed and they were taught how to take care of the dressing.
Correct.
But due
They
to
accidentally removed it.
Yes, sir.
Correct. Correct. Okay. And Hari, one of our students, says follow-up is done by the same surgeon or the surgical team member. Is that acceptable? Essentially, it means there is no blinding.
Yes.
And that leads to bias. All right.
Yes.
I think the person who assesses the wound status must be somebody who is very different from the surgical team and who probably doesn't even know what was done for the patient. So that kind of blinding is preferable. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Ramakrishna says, yeah, the same thing. Blinding, not having blinding is good. How do we do blinding in this case, considering the fact that one needs VAC treatment and the other doesn't? Think about it, Sarabjit. Blinding is a problem in these cases, but people have found ways and means of getting around it.
So before taking off for the surgery,
yeah,
patient should be decided that what kind of intervention should be applied for this patient.
No. You see, you're randomizing it. Okay, the patient is on the table and then you're randomizing it and the surgeon is told this is for VAC, this is for non-VAC. Okay,
So,
what you need to do is to do the blinding. The surgeon who did the operation should not be assessing. That's number one. Some completely new person who has never seen the patient, who has never been in the OT comes there. But what you do is that have the external paraphernalia, like the tubes, the dressing, the equipment, everything the same as in a patient who has had VAC dressing. Okay, and that must be a dummy machine. That suction machine must be a dummy machine. It must be covered, both the active and the dummy machines must be covered by a black bag, for example. So the assessor doesn't know. It looks the same to him. So he doesn't know whether suction is applied or not, but his only job is to assess the wound. That is the way blinding is done. It is tedious, but it can be done. Nishant, you raised your hand.
Sir, another thing is once we put the VAC, like he said, there should be a 70 to 80% reduction in the size of the foam. How do we blind this on the patient?
No, you don't have to blind this at all.
So only at the end of it,
only
you're
assessing at the end of the study period. 7 days, 12 days, or whatever the study period was. Ramakrishna, you have raised your hand.
Yeah, I was trying to respond to what Dr. Shivaram was telling. He said preoperative optimization, all those things they should have mentioned in the article, but they have not mentioned. That is okay. But when considering this mixing of the Rives-Toppa ACS PR cases, it's not really a wrong thing because they have given the table in table number 2. If you see, they have given how many cases of Rives-Toppa is there, ACS is there, and TAR is there, and both the groups are having
the same
similar
numbers,
number of cases.
Yeah.
So this may be a confounding factor, but when confounding factors are equally distributed between 2 groups, it is acceptable.
I would agree.
And they have shown that.
You lost your
0.1.
Yeah.
So this is not a objection, sir. It should be acceptable.
All right, Ravi, please unmute yourself.
Other thing you could have done is once the surgeon finishes the surgery, he walks away and then somebody else does the dressing. So then the surgeon doesn't know who is actually, what dressing the patient has. And as you said, to, sort of dummy the other patient and then.
That wouldn't work, Ravi, because he has done the operation. So he knows what the case is.
The case he will know.
The dressing doesn't matter, but he knows that he has put the vacuum dress in this, vacuum in this patient. So that is that wouldn't help the situation.
Yeah, in the beginning of the article also he mentions about because of this tubes business that that blinding could not be done. So having this additional thing is a dummy and all, it is a additional
Very
additional
tedious,
work
but can
in
be
this
done.
question.
Yeah. There is one
Tedious.
question. Yeah. One
And I
question.
think
Sorry. Go on.
Shivaram,
Please.
you met. Yeah. Sorry. Shivaram, you mentioned sometime the time factor. It is mentioned in the table. I think next, table number 3. It is there. The time duration of the both groups. Smoking.
No. Yeah, right. But because if the time duration is more than 2.5 3 hours, they give the redosing of the antibiotic. Because of you are looking at the surgical site occurrences, all these are important.
Yeah. So there's one question. What is the difference between the common Romovac drain that we use, a suction drain, and this vac that they have used, the PicoVac system? The answer is that it is a standardized suction at negative 80 millimeters of mercury. You never know what the Romovac does. You don't know how much it is, you don't measure it, but this actually measures and makes sure that there is a standardized degree of negative suction. All right. Rajgopal sir, can we proceed? Please take over, sir.
Yeah. We can. Yeah, Sarabjit.
Yes.
Proceed.
Yes. Now we'll discuss the results of this study.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You can hear me.
Can you change the slide? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. The result in total, 72 patients in the treatment group and 74 patients in the control group completed the study protocol and were included in the analysis. So these are the first table. These are the baseline characteristics. The male, female, how many? This shows the 72 patients with negative pressure wound therapy and 74 with the control group. There was no statistically significant differences were found in both the groups regarding the pre-operative variables. So these are all the pre-operative variables which has been shown here, like obesity patients in one group was 18 and other group was 19. Smoking was 29, 20. So it showed no statistically significant differences. Then we discussed to the perioperative variables and the wound complication at post-op day 30. This table I have divided into two halves. So first is the type of repair. So reverse TOPA was done in 48 and control group with control group 45. In this, P was not significant. So these were the different types of hernia repairs in each group, which type of hernia was repaired. These were all not statistically significant. In this, here they have mentioned about the operative period of 138 plus minus 35.7 in the intervention group and 128 minutes in the control group. This operating time, it can be because of the complexity of applying the vac dressing. This difference might be there, but again, it is not statistically significant over here. Now we see the mean global surgical site occurrences. Here we can see that 12 patients with negative pressure wound therapy had surgical site occurrences, whereas in the control group with the conventional dressing, 22 patients had. And wound infection, 6 patients. There were no patient developed wound infection who had a negative pressure wound therapy. But with the conventional dressing, 6 patients developed, and this is statistically significant. Other surgical site occurrences like seroma, hematoma, and wound dehiscence, there was not much statistical significance seen in both the cases. The mean length of stay in hospital was almost the same. Readmission after 30 days post-operatively in negative pressure were 2 patients, in control group 6 patients. Surgical wound revision was done for 1 patient and control group was done for 2 patients. Here, the 6 patient who had surgical wound infection, initially they responded to the oral antibiotics. But in this, out of 3 of them, reoperation with VAC therapy was required to treat the infection. And the remaining patient only required intravenous antibiotics for 10 days. In patients with wound dehiscence, 2 patients in the treatment group and 4 patients in the control group. Of the 6 patients, of this total 6 patients, 4 had undergone component separation and 2 had undergone transversus abdominis wall repair. All cases of dehiscence required vacuum-assisted treatment, and 2 patients in the control group also required surgical revision with delayed closure. There were no reported adverse events attributed to the specific single-use non-PICO dressing. There were no enterotomies or need for concomitant bowel resection during hernia repair. The mean length of stay tended to be shorter in the patient of treatment group compared to the control group, but this was not statistically significant. Then this is the table which analyzes the risk factors related to the surgical site infection after the hernia repair. Which was significant over here was the BMI, obesity. In patient, out of the 6 patients who developed infection, 5 of them were obese, and one was non-obese. In other cases of smoking, diabetes, COPD, immunosuppression, all this, they did not find a statistically significant data. Another thing which was significant was the type of repair. The component repair, component separation technique, in out of the 6 patients who developed infection, 5 of them had undergone component separation. And use of PICO dressing. So this is very significant because all the 6 patients who developed infection were of the control group, and they didn't have the negative pressure wound therapy. So the use of specific PICO dressing conferred a significant protective effect against the infection. So with discussion part. So should I continue?
Yeah, I think you can stop now. If there's anything anybody wants to, Dr. Lakshman, please. Shivaram.
Dr. Ramakrishna has pointed out 2 mistakes in the table. Can you come in and explain, please, Ramakrishna?
Unmute, I think.
Unmute, please.
Can you hear me, sir, now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. These are small regarding numbers. This table number 2, he has shown prosthesis location, subfacial, retromuscular, and preperitoneal. He has given on the control group 14, 48, and 11. If you total all these things, it becomes 73, whereas total number should be 74. That is one thing. The second thing is this significance level is showing global SSO percentage, showing 2.042. Actually, it was coming almost near 0.05. So I just recalculated it using our calculator.
Yeah.
It comes more than 0.05%.
Okay.
It comes to 0.061.
Yeah, you had
So
a similar experience with the
statistically
BJS.
Yeah, previous journal club also we had similar experience. That's why I just checked it.
Yeah.
And this is not significant actually, this figure.
Yeah. Sarabjit, there's a question. What is post hoc analysis?
I don't know.
All right. Hari, you come in. You have answered it correctly. Go on. Tell us.
Sir, actually, post protocol and after the event happened, so this is a decision taken after it happens. So generally, this is discouraged.
Yeah.
So maybe at this time they wanted.
All right. Shivaram, you have any comments?
No.
Is post hoc analysis done in this study?
It's not done in this study.
No, sorry.
It is done, sir. This
Is it? I thought I
actually,
missed it then. Where is it done? I missed it then. Yeah.
this table number 3, it shows the risk factors related to SSI. This is not the primary aims and objective. Aims and objective, the analysis of SSI.
Secondary, there are the secondary objectives, right? Secondary outcomes.
No, sir. No. Here, the thing is little different. They were looking only whether this WAC dressing is going to prevent infection or not.
That's
But
all.
here the analysis is not that. It is
Yeah,
the
fair.
analysis which is calculating the risk factors and univariate p-value they are calculating and telling obesity and the other thing, the type of repair, ACS.
Okay.
These two contributes more to infection. This is not the aim of the study.
Yeah.
This has come after the study results, and this is a typical example for post hoc analysis.
Sir, Hari here, sir. But they have explained this in the data analysis, like
Yeah.
they have univariate analysis we made in that study. They mentioned like data analysis. They have included all these things.
What
Data,
wrong-
yeah, that's what I'm telling. Data analysis is done, that is agreed, but that was not the objective of the study. The objective of the study was to compare WAC dressing with the conventional dressing, whether it is going to decrease the SSO. That is the aim and objective of the study.
Okay.
This has come later. They
Okay.
were, it was not required to analyze whether infection is because of the obesity or not. They have introduced it later after seeing the results. So this becomes post hoc analysis.
Post-hoc. Okay.
In the SSO, SSI is also included.
Yes.
Yes.
SSI included, sir, but they were comparing
Correct.
whether SSI is higher in control group compared to the WAC dressing. That's what they were looking at it, but they were not looking at whether SSI is more common in obesity patient or not.
Yes.
That was not their objective.
Yeah.
And similarly, SSY, is it more with ACS? They were not having this objective when they started the study. This was introduced only after looking at the result. The whole, the table number 3, it is the same thing. Because there is no significant value for other things, they have considered these two things, and in the conclusion, they are going to mention that obesity and ACS are risk factor for SSI. This is not in the objective.
Godi sir wants to tell something.
Please, sir.
Yeah. I lost my connection for a few minutes. I don't know whether this question has been raised by anybody else. But my objection to the study is objection to the basic rationale of the hypothesis of the study. The hypothesis is that this WAC dressing is likely to reduce the SSO. That is the hypothesis. But the WAC dressing has been applied after complete closure of the wound. The subcutaneous tissue is closed, the facial closure is done, skin is closed, and then the WAC dressing is used. Do you mean to say that the vacuum or the negative pressure is transmitted to subcutaneous tissue through a closed wound after closing the skin? Or is it transmitted to subcutaneous tissue transcutaneously? How is vacuum transmitted to subcutaneous tissue after closing the wound? Is my question. I hope I am heard.
Yeah. I was wondering if Rajgopal would take it, sir. I'll take it, sir. There are studies which have done it through closed wounds as well, sir. The standard teaching is that if you have a closed incision, a surgical incision, it gets sealed off by fibrin within 12 hours. That is the rationale by which you leave the wounds open the next morning after you have done a surgical procedure. But here, because of the constant suction that is applied from the time you close the skin, that does go through the gaps between the sutures and gives effective suction to the subcutaneous and even deeper tissues. So that is the current working hypothesis, and people have shown that it effectively does suck out fluids and exudates from the depths of the wound, even when the primary wound is closed, sir. I don't think it is transcutaneous. It is through the gaps between the sutures, sir.
Yeah, there will be a silicone foam which is in contact with the skin, and over that the pressure is suction pressure is applied. Because of that, as Dr. Lakshman said, between the skin staples or sutures,
Sutures.
sucks uniformly all over the wound, entire length of the wound, sir. That's the premises.
Yes.
Shenoy sir, closing comments. It's getting to be 10:15, 10:20.
Sarabjit, any more any important slides are there? Can you move on? Just another few minutes. You can escape this. These are common risk factors, and
Yes,
yeah,
so
go
these are
ahead.
factors. Here they have discussed like how obesity is related to the surgical site infection and component separation, sir.
That is okay. You can
Yes.
go ahead. Next, show some more slides.
Here, these are some previous studies, sir, which it shows that negative pressure dressing over the closed incision in ventral hernia repair.
Can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
Next slide. Yeah.
How it works.
I think basically the negative pressure works. We have used it in the
Yes, sir.
leg ulcers, no? Lot of.
Yes, sir.
You have already mentioned the initial part that
Yes.
dead space reduction and the angiogenesis, etc. Next
Yes,
slide.
sir.
Next.
These were few limitation of negative pressure wound. Like it did not change any outcome with hematoma or seroma formation, sir.
Okay. Next.
Then these are the limitation of the study.
Yeah, I think the one of the things in the limitation I thought is a single center study,
Yes, sir.
not multi-center, and some kind of a bias. Yes, it is always there because operating team, one of them are assessing it, as this has been already discussed. Dr. Gabriel, you want to say something? Dr. Gabriel selected this topic in the sense it's a common phenomenon. Every one of us treat the incisional hernias. So whether so it is for some knowledge purpose as well as for the randomized control study. So Gabriel, you are there?
No, sir. No, sir. Nothing. Actually, Sarabjit had selected around 5 or 6 of them, and then had sent them to Dr. Lakshman, and Dr. Lakshman selected this paper. Yeah. So if any comments have to come, they have to come from Dr. Lakshman only.
Anyway, Lakshman, I should tell a big thanks to you and Dr. Ramakrishna and all other teams, because your inputs are very, very valuable and for the postgraduate knowledge. And I think you please do concluding remarks.
All right. Thank you. Sarabjit, I think you did a good job. Really good job. You have worked hard. You've looked at parallel references, and I think I must congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
For future reference, for postgraduates, with Dr. Shenoy's permission, I would like to make 2 or 3 observations. One, the journal club is designed to critique the paper. So you can see, if you have 1 hour, just discussing the good and the bad points and some of the things that are shown up in statistics, the tables and results and all that will take an hour. So perhaps one should presume that everybody knows about these types of repair, and that introduction, the theory part of it, perhaps could be left out, so that you have more time to critique the paper. And in the paper, you would do the critique at every step, after the materials and methods, after results, and after the discussion. So if you do that, the final comment then would be, and that is something we have to do before we close today, after the critique and after all the discussion, the most important part of a journal club is to answer 2 simple questions. The kind of study that is done and that is being discussed, is that applicable to our patients? Okay, yeah, that's where you have said already. Okay, that's very correct. So, somebody has asked a very good question. Is this equipment available in India?
Yes.
The answer is yes, if not the very same. Similar equipment is available, and that this study can be eminently done in India. But having looked at all this, that is something I want you to answer, Sarabjit.
Yes, sir.
Would you now recommend, when you do the next incisional hernia repair, based on this study, would you recommend that we start using negative pressure therapy?
So one was the drawback of this study was
No, just answer me yes,
yes,
or no, and then you have to
No.
justify that answer.
No, sir.
Yeah, see, always surgeons take very clear-cut decisions. They don't beat around the bush. So you say no.
No.
Why no?
Sir, because there are not a lot of evidences present that it is very helpful
In this study.
in this study.
Yeah.
Sir.
So what are the things that make you know? I'll come with my answer after you say this. What
Yes,
are the
sir.
things that tell you that the conclusions are not as clear-cut as they make it sound, as they think it is? Yeah.
So because they had, like we had discussed, they had excluded the patient who had complications.
Yeah.
They did not take into consideration those data, so which
Yes,
would have
correct.
changed the
Yes.
outcome of the studies.
Correct.
And they didn't. They tried to show the cost effectiveness,
Yeah.
but the actual cost of this pico dressing they haven't mentioned about it. So
It is very expensive. You can take it
Yes.
from me. Any negative pressure is very expensive. Okay.
yes, yes,
Yeah. Something else? Any other points? You see,
sir, as
the cost. Yeah. Let me just finish it for the sake of completion. The cost, they say, is that if you reduce the morbidity, then it looks after the extra cost of the negative suction. But can you imagine a situation where isolated infection rate is less compared to other things? Seroma, you would expect seroma to be less. It is not less. You would expect hematoma to be less. It is not less. Only isolated infection is less. So it makes me wonder why that should happen. And the second thing is, how long do your incision hernia patients stay in hospital?
So maximum 2 days.
Yes. All of us, we send them home in a couple of days. What was their length of stay? 7 days, 6 to 7 days.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you find that even though they try to make a big condition, big, noise about how good this thing is, in my view, it really is not. And so I certainly would not start using negative pressure for my wounds from tomorrow. All right. So there are limitations of this study. And with this, sir, I think the concluding remark must come from you, sir, Professor Shenoy, sir, and then we will close.
Yeah, nothing. I just want to say thanks to the Karnataka State Association for giving this opportunity. And remember, it is like a multicentric trial. It is something like a multicentric study. This online presentation also involves multiple people, multiple departments of different colleges, and definitely which will help the postgraduates in improving your knowledge. That's all I can say. Please participate. Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.